In the late 1800s, revolutionary inventions like the railroad and electricity reshaped society, ushering in a new era of rapid development. Among the many changing industries, food manufacturing stood out during this period of industrialization. The quaint notion of farm fresh faded away as assembly lines and corporate giants like Quaker dominated the food industry. Seeking to satisfy the masses, they introduced vibrant, long-lasting products, resorting to chemical additives and preservatives in the absence of widespread refrigeration. Chalk whitened milk, while formaldehyde preserved many meats. Ingredients were often undisclosed, allowing harmful chemicals to infiltrate the American food supply without regulatory oversight. Amidst this era of uncertainty, a light of awareness rose in the figure of chemist Harvey Wiley. Leading the Department of Agriculture in 1883, he was relentless in his pursuit of food purity. Upholding his mandate from the beginning, Wiley sought to expose the clandestine deterioration of American health through covert adulterations, laying the foundation for a revolution in food safety. Harvey Wiley was born on October 18, 1844, near the town in Kent, Jefferson County, Indiana. As both a farmer and a preacher, his father held a firm belief in social justice. Thus, an essential belief was passed down to Wiley. He was a child of the land. These foundational values would go on to steer him towards his future career. After acquiring his MD in Indiana Medical College, Wiley would go on to study chemistry and eventually accept a chemistry profession position at Purdue University. 1878 would be the year his path towards food purity began, after taking a sabbatical in Germany for nutrition study. The experience left Wiley with insight into the world of food manufacturing. This newfound interest in American food industry was the spark that ignited the bonfire. As Wiley wrote, "I carried back a passion for examining food products, especially sugars. The Indiana State Board of Health ordered him to investigate adulteration in the sugars and syrups on sale in the state. Almost every honey and syrup he tested was fraudulent. These findings resulted in backlash from the industry, who named his results the Wiley Lie." In 1883, Wiley left Purdue University amidst continuous criticism from trustees. Shortly thereafter, he assumed a pivotal role as chief of the Division of Chemistry in the Department of Agriculture, solidifying his influence in the food industry. Over the next decade, Wiley would undertake extensive and exhaustive investigations of adulteration, culminating in the publication of Bulletin No. 13, a detailing of the Bureau's findings. Despite efforts to introduce pure food bills to Congress based on said findings, they were constantly thwarted by powerful food corporations. Wiley would later lament, "The interests opposed to pure food legislation had good success in smothering any attempts on the part of the committee to bring such bills out for serious consideration." In this tumult of corruption within the food industry, as the Spanish-American War interrupted, greed-driven powerful meat packers such as Armour were tasked with providing food for the nation's troops. But, cutting corners, the soldiers were left with consuming rancid, poor-quality meat which had the odor of embalmed bodies. Dubbed the Embalmed Meat Scandal, this event marked a pivotal moment of public outcry, galvanizing dissent against such egregious practices. Wiley recognized the potential risks associated with such chemicals, but had not yet analyzed this aspect of food purity. Seeking answers, he turned to the most reliable source he knew, an experiment. Believing that trying it on the dog was the most convincing way to obtain results, he was allotted $5,000 from Congress in March of the same year to conduct his proposed idea of the hygienic table trials in which he would feed 12 young, robust fellows 3 meals daily. Half would receive pure, unadulterated food, while the others would be served the adulterated version. With everyone's diets strictly controlled, it would address his concern, whether such preservatives should ever be used or not. Wiley's first trial looked into the common preservative borax, which over 7 months revealed that consumption of the chemical led to stark decline in health for the young men. It left only half able to endure the entirety of the trial without illness forcing them to drop out. Using this information, he called upon Congress in his report to think about the protection of the young, the sick, and the debilitated, to entice the implications of food labels. News of Wiley's experiments began to spread throughout newspapers, headed by George Rothwell Brown, a columnist in the Washington Post. After publishing his first piece on Wiley's group, titled Dr. Wiley and His Boarders, he found a replacement for the name Hygienic Table Trials, coining the term the Poison Squad. The conclusion of Wiley's experiments led to scheduled congressional hearings for a possible new food law. Despite passing the House, the bill was swiftly shut down in the Senate by corporations who lobbied against it. This failure forced Wiley to realize that he needed a more impactful way of approaching Congress. These politicians were not fazed by the facts he presented to them. Wiley needed something that would guarantee their attention and support. He needed allies. Wiley would go on to meet political activist Alice Lakey. Together, they gained the support of women's groups across the country, such as the National Consumers League, writing and speaking to Congress about passing a food law. In the wake of their alliance, large food manufacturers such as Heinz pounced on the opportunity to gain the public's trust, fueling this awakening economy with food marketed as pure. By February of 1905, Wiley took his march for pure food to the White House. Backed by his allies, he confronted President Roosevelt with pure food legislation. By December of that year, Roosevelt declared his backing of the law to Congress. In June of 1906, amidst the debate for Wiley's food law, headlines from novelist Upton Sinclair's recently published The Jungle captured the public's attention. It exposed the unsanitary realities of the meatpacking industry, including meat contaminated with rat feces and tuberculosis-riddled cattle sold as healthy. Alarmed by what Sinclair wrote, President Roosevelt initiated his own investigations, uncovering similar conditions. Roosevelt initially kept the full report hidden, but it was later leaked by Sinclair himself. These revelations prompted his immediate demand for a Meat Safety Act. The whole nation was finally discussing food safety, putting Congress under pressure from every direction, a moment which Wiley seized to lobby for his own law. And by the end of that month, 2 laws were passed. Both the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act were signed into law June 30th by President Roosevelt. The first federally regulated law to ensure the safety of food for the American public. These 2 acts, coupled, had been the most pivotal laws in the history of food purity, marking the beginning of the legislative journey on the issue. Accurate labeling would now be required, and the prevalence of adulterations would be diminished. The public recognized Wiley's crucial influence, simply calling the Pure Food and Drug Act Dr. Wiley's Law. Over the next 2 decades, Wiley would continue to advance towards pure food. The Bureau of Chemistry was tasked with enforcing this new legislation against the sale of misbranded or adulterated food and drugs in the U.S. Wiley accomplished this partly through further Poison Squad trials. However, his unwavering dedication soon became a source of frustration for his superiors, who took the infiltrated food company's criticism personally. He would later resign as chief chemist on March 15, 1912, after constant confrontation by his boss, Secretary James Willison, and President Taft restricting the research he could publish. After accepting a job at Good Housekeeping magazine writing articles, and just 2 weeks later as the director of the Bureau of Foods, he would go on to create what is now the GH Seal of Approval, educating readers on the imposing dangers of adulterations, advocating for food safety practices ahead of his time. Despite the reforms, he felt strongly that there was more to be done, and he spent the rest of his years continuing to be food regulation's strongest activist, even through worsening health. Harvey Washington Wiley died June 30th, 1930, exactly 24 years after President Roosevelt signed the 1906 law. His tombstone read, "Father of the Pure Food and Drug Act." 3 years before his death, the Bureau of Chemistry split, creating the FDA. In 1938, 8 years after Wiley's passing, the FDCA was passed, providing the FDA with its first significant authority to oversee the labeling and safety of food, drugs, and cosmetics before they reached the market. The 1938 Act, supplemented by subsequent amendments, served as the cornerstone of the FDA's extensive regulatory authority. Today, the FDA is an independent agency, paramount in protecting public health and ensuring the safety and efficacy of drugs, biological products, and medical devices for both humans and animals. This had been the dream and work of Wiley. His unwavering commitment to the pursuit of pure and safe food culminated in the groundbreaking Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, revolutionizing not only the nation's approach to food regulation, but also the very fabric of American safety standards. Though Sinclair is commonly recognized for his book The Jungle as the final catalyst, Wiley laid the law's groundwork from the start, studying and fighting for food regulation for decades. Wiley built an integral part of the U.S. government. His legacy goes beyond legislative victories. It symbolizes a fundamental shift where every citizen's welfare becomes a central concern of governance. Wiley's resilience forever shaped the nation's health moving forward. He was the father of food safety.
And to the protection of our health, which is the most valuable asset we have, and our pocketbooks.